This is Guy Burgess. Heidi and I would like to welcome you to the Moving Beyond Intractability Massive Open Online Seminar Series. And we wanted in this video to give you a quick overview of the rationale for the project and a bit of a preview of what you might expect. First of all, the Moving Beyond Intractability project's the natural outgrowth of a 30-year series of projects that we've had here at the University of Colorado looking at intractable conflict, going way back to a project we did in the early 90s when the internet was just kind of a figment of somebody's imagination for the United States Institute of Peace. And the first question you might want to ask is, what is intractable conflict anyway? And as you'll see as you get into the seminar, there's a lot of different ways to define it, each with their own advantages and disadvantages. One of the ones that I've liked is that intractable conflicts are those that resist the best available agreement-based dispute resolution processes, the kind of thing that you learn about in Roger Fisher and Bill Urey's best-selling book, Getting to Yes. Another way to think about intractable conflict is they're zero-sum conflicts, that is, or win-lose conflicts for which there are no win-win solutions. If somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose, that makes things pretty dicey. Another thing that contributes to intractable conflict is psychological complexity. A lot of our models of the way people think are sort of like a spreadsheet where we tally up the costs and benefits and we decide what the rational decision is. We now know, as Mary Fitzduff documents in this very interesting new book, that the human brain doesn't work that way, and that there's a lot of very sophisticated, not very rational thinking that goes on that has lots of advantages, but we need to think in terms of the full complexity of the way people think, and that makes a lot of our conflict resolution strategies not quite up to the challenge just yet. We also need to think about social complexity. One of the things that we'll talk about over the course of the seminar is the interplay between biological ecosystem views of the way the world works and social ecosystem views. And the key thing about a complex social system is it's composed of lots of individuals, like this flock of birds, where everybody's making their own decisions about what to do, but they all interact with one another in complex ways. That's the way cities are. That's the way human society is. There are literally billions of people, each doing what they want to do according to their own complex set of social psychological decision rules, and that gets awfully hard to predict, and that's part of what makes conflict so intractable. One way to visualize this is a pool table. One of the things that you might try to think about when you're trying to make a good decision is kind of like making the perfect pool shot, where you shoot the cue ball and it bounces off everything and everything works out just the way you want. Well, you can think of social complexity as a gigantic pool table with zillions of balls and lots of different people taking shots at the same time. And that's a pretty daunting challenge as well. Another thing that contributes to intractability is simply scale. One of the things I learned years ago when I was on a panel with a scientist from the Manhattan Project that developed nuclear weapons was that 4 orders of magnitude is the difference between conventional explosives and nuclear weapons. One of the really daunting things to consider when considering large-scale societal conflict is a modest conflict like Israel and Palestine. Maybe involves roughly 30 million people, not quite that many. But that's on the order of 7 orders of magnitude, or 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 7 times more complicated than your simple mediation triad, where you have 2 parties and a mediator. And when you're talking about scale differences like that, that really poses another set of really daunting challenges. Another thing I should make clear at the onset here is this is a US-based project. And we look at the world from our perch here in Colorado, and we're relatively deeply immersed in the kinds of conflicts that we face in the United States, and we look out at the way our friends and colleagues around the world have struggled with their problems. But we don't want to pretend like we're speaking for the whole world. We're having enough trouble just figuring out how to deal with conflicts in the United States. So what we offer is a US-based perspective, but in the spirit of cross-fertilization and collaborative learning and a lot of humility that hopefully together out of the discussions that are part of the seminar will be able to advance the frontier of the field. Now, part of our focus, and this is where the focus of the field is now in the United States, or certainly should be, is on the increasing polarization of our society. The Pew Research Center has lots of great opinion poll data that tells us a lot about the nature of the problem. This paper, which I recommend highly in a lot of their other work, notes that in 1994, not all that long ago, 64% of Republicans were more conservative than the median Democrat, and 70% of Democrats were more liberal than the median Republican. But by 2014, you can see from this that things have shifted a lot. So it's now 92% and 94%. So there's almost no overlap between conservatives and liberals. And it's gotten worse since 2014, as this update shows. And we're getting further and further apart. So the study of intractable conflict is, a big part of it is politics, which is threatening the very viability of the whole idea of democracy. But it's more than just the red-blue conflict. There are lots and lots of things that could go wrong, threats that we need to pay attention to. One of the things we'll talk about over the course of these seminars is perfect storm conflicts, where you have a confluence of factors that come together and things really explode. This is what led to World War I and World War II, what threatened to lead to a nuclear holocaust in the Cold War, and it could go several different ways. I mean, we could very easily have an updated high-tech version of George Orwell's 1984 and some of the disturbing articles that we'll cite coming out of China. I think that seemed pretty possible, not to mention the manipulation of social media in this country and all sorts of things. There's also a very real possibility that we may be heading again towards major confrontations with China and with Russia, as these two articles point out. But it isn't just large-scale societal conflicts. We also, because of intractable conflict, we can't deal with a whole range of problems like global warming or climate change or the whole threat of new emerging infectious diseases. And as we get into this again over the course of the seminars, there'll be a lot more problem-solving areas where we're just unable to function because of intractable conflict. So one of the arguments that we make is that intractable conflict is a climate change class problem. Initially, it was a largely unrecognized problem that posed a great threat to humanity that only a few climate scientists even understood about, but they were able to raise it to the front of the public's attention all over the world. And we need to do something like that with respect to intractable conflict. I've always liked the line from the movie Apollo 13 about the near catastrophe on one of our early Apollo missions to the moon, where the spacecraft actually had a major explosion and they just barely got people back. But the line was that we just can't fail. And that was just a small accident involving a few folks. We can't fail because what we're talking about is the very future of human civilization. Now, it's not enough to just get really fired up and fight harder. We need to be aware of something that a county commissioner here used to call the primal scream syndrome, of just getting mad and wanting everybody to know that you're mad, but refusing to take the painstaking and difficult steps needed to actually address the problem. And good intentions aren't enough. you've got to really think through things. And this is time for very serious thinking, because a lot of the ways that we thought the world works just don't work anymore. And we got to change, and we've got to learn. For Peacebuilders, and we've had the privilege of working with a lot of folks from the Alliance for Peace Building over the years and the United States Institute of Peace, as they've gone out and tried to help people in other parts of the world dealing with terrible conflicts. Now, a lot of those ideas we have to apply here in the United States now, and in the other developed democracies that we used to think were above these kinds of problems. Well, we're not. And in doing this, we've got to address the real concerns of the skeptics. I mean, a lot of people thought peace building had lots and lots of problems for good reason. And we need to address those seriously, but we also need to address the cynical belief that, oh, it's just awful and there's nothing to be done. While kumbaya solutions may be unrealistic, so's the cynical belief that we can't do better. It's also time to improve the talk, not just walk the talk, but actually make it better. The Alliance for Peace Building has been sort of working its way through a series of publications, Peace Building 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0, well, things that try to deal more effectively with scale, complexity, intractability, and what the military calls wicked problems. Now, as we do this, it's important that we don't try to reinvent the wheel. We want to build on what we know already, which is a great deal, and then try to adapt those ideas to the complexities of contemporary intractable conflict. This is the sort of thing that everybody must play a role. Intractable conflicts are determined by the cumulative decisions of everybody in a society, not just the actions of a few leaders, though they obviously have a huge impact. And it is true that if you're not part of the solution, to some very significant degree, you're part of the problem. And we also need to specialize. It's not like everybody has to do the same thing. There are lots and lots of things that need doing, which we'll talk about again over the course of the seminar. And as Durkheim documented, this is what, as a sociologist, I learned about Durkheim early in graduate school, and the whole notion of division of labor and how we each have specialized roles. And we have to get better at fulfilling those roles. And this requires a learning curve accelerator. Because the truth of the matter is the sort of business as usual way that people learn about how to handle conflict more constructively is pretty inadequate, partly because we don't address these issues very much in either higher education or primary and secondary schools, or in real life. And the truth is that at the rate you normally learn about things, you can't get to the point where you can really address the tough problem. So we've got to find some way to speed the rate at which people learn more constructive approaches. And this is why we've been so fascinated with the promise of massive open online courses, which were really, really big deal a couple of years ago, and they've sort of faded. But the idea is to put learning materials available for free online where anybody, anywhere can get them instantly for free. But our sense was that you don't need a massive open online course, because courses imply a fixed body of knowledge, and you study it and you take a test and you get a certificate. We're dealing with tough problems for which there are no clear solutions. And what you need to do is to work through and explore them together. That's what you do in a seminar, not a course. We also want to focus on practical theoretical ideas, general principles. Kurt Lewin was widely quoted years ago as saying there's nothing so practical and widely adaptable to changing conditions as a good theory. There are not cookbook solutions. In this situation, you do X, Y, and Z and everything will work out. You've got to have some sort of rough ideas of the kinds of dynamics that are at play, things that are making things worse, things that could be make things better and to be able to adapt those to specific situations. So the whole focus of these seminars is going to be on the development of practical theory that's easy for you to adapt to your particular conflict problems. We've also tried to design something that works for people with very busy schedules. There's only a few years in life where you can really devote lots and lots of time to something like this. Otherwise, you've got to just sort of fit it in with the time that you spend reading the news and all of that sort of thing. So what we have set up is a system that you can follow on social media, sign up for us on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, or you can get email newsletters once a week, or you can go to the website and see everything. And it's all built around a series of short posts. Now, most of them will be shorter than this little video. 15 minutes or less. A lot of them we want to get down in the 5-minute range. And the idea is you review a list of these, and there will be, this is a list of the kinds of things that we'll be sending out on our social media feeds. Find ones that are interesting, take a look at them, and then everything will have a little box like this, which will link you to all of the related posts. So as you find something interesting, it's easy to browse around and find other things and really work your way through a larger and more involved argument. Finally, audiences. This is a system that's set up for everyday citizens who are looking for more constructive ways of thinking about the conflicts that are tearing apart their society. It's a system for advocates and activists, students and educators, conflict resolution and peace-building practitioners, people who actually get paid for doing this sort of thing, and expert scholars and practitioners who are really trying to think things through. So there's a lot of different levels in which you can participate and lots of different options. You're invited to join us. There's more information on the website. And finally, you might look at our constructive confrontation initiative, which is what we're going to be working through this spring over the next 3 months. The idea is that in these contentious times, not many people are interested in pursuing compromise and agreement. But I think there are a lot of folks, and these are the folks that we're trying to address, who are very interested in figuring out how we can confront one another over today's tough issues in more constructive ways that preserve and strengthen democracy, protect us from anarchy and authoritarian rule, or the prospect of a catastrophic violent conflict. So take a look, get involved, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you.